so element 115.
Yeah.
So you have it in this triangle-shaped form.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ask how they got into a triangle-shaped form? Was it made like this? This is how it came in the reactor?
I'm sure I did, but I mean, it only worked like that. It worked like a stack of discs and had to be cut at a certain angle to work in the reactor. And
did they say they cut it, or did they say it was already cut?
Well, it was already cut, and they were duplicating it.
Pull that microphone up, too.
Sure.
So they were duplicating it. Did they have more of it, this element?
Yeah, they had quite a bit of it. So either there was a quantity in other crafts or other reactors that they removed. Yeah.
But was there any discussion that there had been some sort of an exchange where they had been giving this?
No.
So one of the things, like, do you know who Diana Pasulka is? She's an author that's written some interesting stuff about UFOs, and she's worked with Gary Nolan and, on material recollection from supposed crash sites. And she said that the way these researchers refer to these crafts, they refer to them as donations. And
I guess that's possible.
Right. Well, doesn't it make sense if this thing crashed, why is it perfect? Why is it not destroyed?
Look, I've heard so many. I'm not into UFOs.
Right.
As
Which
crazy
is hilarious.
as that. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm just interested in the technology, and I feel very privileged to have been involved in the project. But I don't know. I don't think there can be that many crashes. Do you?
No.
This advanced technology,
Exactly.
You think they're coming to Earth and just there's a thunderstorm and they're crashing into the ground? I'm not buying that.
There's one logical explanation that does actually make sense. There were some high altitude nuclear tests that they did. And
well, there was the Teak test, back in the 60s.
Starfish Prime.
And Starfish Prime, right.
Yeah. If you had no idea that this was about to happen and you were hovering over Earth observing us.
What are the chances? I mean, what are the chances?
They're not very high.
Yeah.
Right?
They're not very, I mean, what are the chances a crash is coming over and a nuclear test at that exact second?
Unless there's a lot more observation than we know. And that they just observe us in a way that we can't see them. Especially if you're going back to the 1950s and 1960s. We have very few satellites. That
was the nuclear cowboy era.
Yeah.
Where they were just...
just
woohoo.
Starfish Prime, explaining to people what they did.
Yeah. They had a 1.4 megaton, detonation up there, and I think all they did, let's see what happens if we blow it up at this altitude.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. There was another test planned to blow up on the moon just to make the Russians look... like we were awesome, But they
detonate the moon. What if they pushed it away and it fucked up our orbit?
Yeah, I think that would take a lot more.
I know.
I mean, there was. I don't remember what the project.
Project A19.
Oh, A19. That was it. Yeah.
Study of lunar research flights.
Detonated nuclear bomb. Yeah. I can't pull up these numbers, but yeah, Project A1118.
Crazy.
Yeah, we're gonna do that because
that's
everybody on Earth could just go outside and look up the moon, get blown up,
yeah.
and the explosion would be faintly visible to the human eye to people on Earth.
Yeah.
Boy.
I still think they should have done that, but.
Yeah, but you're the guy that put a jet engine in the back of a Honda. Let's see.
I honestly think they should detonate a nuclear bomb on the 4th of July every year. But that's just me.
Well, also, you live in Nevada. That is where you used to, at least. It had a long history of them doing that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, going back to this reactor. So... how was it explained to you? Did they explain to you how the technology works or what they know about it?
Now, the way it was explained to me is when I got to be alone with Barry, he said he was excited to show this to me. He said, "I'm going to turn. This is the reactor that we assume powers the craft." Sorry.
No worries.
I'm going to show you the reactor that powers the craft. And he turned it on. Small little dome on a flat little plate. I said,
Was this in the craft or was this on a
no,
table?
no, this is in the experimental area.
Okay.
And
So this was not the one that was in the sport craft. This was another one.
this was another one.
This is it right here.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that's in the film.
And on the table, and he had it there, and he went over to the emitter and rotated it, and he said, "Try and touch it." And I put my hand on it, and it rebounded off. And the closer you got to it, the more it pushed back, and that's a real shock because there's nothing that pushes back like that. That's a living force field. That's science fiction stuff. So that really got my attention.
So explain what is happening, like in terms of the rotation of this thing. Like what is happening? Like what energy is going into it that's causing it to go on?
Well, actually, we don't know that. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's pushing back. It's a repulsive gravitational field. Like, as far as we know, gravity only has an attractive force to it. We've never, even with antimatter, we've analyzed it, and it still has an attractive force to it. There's no repulsive force that we've discovered, because that would be a great propulsion system. But this repulsed. So this was a new field completely.
But how is he turning it on?
He had the emitter, which is a big pipe.
What is an emitter? Like what is...
The craft itself has, on the main level, has the reactor and what we call the amplifiers. The reactor and 3 amplifiers. Right underneath that, there are 3 emitters that are right under the amplifiers. And we believe the energy from the reactor is amplified by the emitters and...
By the amplifiers.
And transmitted to the emitters. And they produce this field that lifts the craft off the ground. And that's how it works. But there is nothing even in our physics or our science that correlates to that at all.
And what is the energy that's going to them that causes it to turn on?
We don't know. I mean, we just assume it's gravity because it's the only thing we know like that. But it has a negative gravity effect. So it might be a new force entirely.
But when you were saying, so you have this machine that's next to it that you do something to that causes it to turn on.
The emitter.
Right.
There's the amplifier,
Right.
and there's the emitter, which looks like a big pipe.
Right.
And if you rotate the emitter, I don't know how many degrees, was it 20
degrees.
20 degrees or something like that. That connects it in some way to the reactor, and it begins to be powered.
And what is the emitter doing?
It emits that field. It's not it could be a gravitational field, but it's an anti-gravitational field that pushes on the ground.
And what's happening in the emitter? Did you study the emitter?
Well, we attempted to, but no. There was nothing that we really came up with that.
What does it look like? Like, what's the internal structure of it?
It's a hollow pipe with, I guess, little copper-colored plates all inside. It's kind of in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, these guys have been working on it for years before I got there. And there was really...
You got to imagine if you were an intelligent life form from another planet. You know, Diana Pasulka talked about, her and Gary Nolan talked about how they refer to some of these things as donations.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think of them as crashed vehicles because some of them are not crashed. They're completely intact. And
I think David Grush said that too, didn't he?
yeah, I believe he did.
Yeah.
And even, you know, Lazar, when he was talking about it, he
the sports model.
Mhm.
Wasn't that fully intact too?
fully intact.
Yeah.
Yeah, fully intact and operational, and apparently they flew it around.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Well, that was one of the reasons, you know, the whole story how he got caught. It's a really crazy story. So he used to work at Los Alamos. He was a propulsions expert. Guy put a jet engine on the back of a Honda. He was a real freak. He made a hydrogen Corvette in like the 1990s. He was a nutty dude.
Clearly an engineer.
Yes.
That part checks out.
So he gets this job on Area S4 and goes there. And it's all documented in Jeremy Corbell's excellent movie, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. So he goes there and sees this thing, and it's got a American flag sticker on it. And, they basically say, tell us how it works. And he's like, oh, this is ours, because he sees it has a sticker on it. And then he realizes this is made out of some completely unknown alloy. There's no seams in it. It seems to be 3D printed. There's no controls inside of it. It's designed for something that's 3 feet tall. It's all very fucking weird. So he's working on this thing, not making much headway at all. They understood that there was an element 115, that was not even on the periodic table. Eventually found to actually be a thing by the Large Hadron Collider. But even then, they only measured it for a millisecond, right? So then he's saying that they have this stable version of this element, and you bombard it with radiation, and it creates this sort of gravity drive. He's working on this thing, and it's all top secret, so he cannot tell his wife. So they're calling him up at 10 o'clock, like, hey, get to the airport. We need you. And so he would have to fly out at random times, fly out to S4, and his wife was like, this motherfucker's having an affair. Well, I'm going to have an affair too. So she starts fucking her flight attendant or a flight instructor. I think that's what it was. When you have that kind of clearance, they are monitoring everything. They're monitoring all your phone calls. They're so they've realized that his wife is having an affair, and they think that he will be emotionally unstable, and it's too dangerous to have him working on this insanely top secret information if he's not stable. So they tell him, we're going to at least temporarily relieve you of your duties. So he's freaked out, and he tells his friends, like, hey, this is what they're doing there.
Yeah.
They have these things, and they fly them every Wednesday. I'm going to take you guys. There's an area we can go watch. So he takes his friends out there on 2 separate occasions, I believe. They get caught. He gets arrested. They release him, and he realizes, like, I'm kind of fucked. They might kill me. I'm going to have to go public with this. Contacts George Knapp.
I did see that.
Then the whole thing is history.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's wild, man. And I think, and it's still happening. There's still these whistleblowers.
He says they used to fly them, and you could go watch them fly these things. And they were moving in these really weird ways across the sky that you cannot do with conventional aircraft, that they only sort of understood how to, like, pick it up and put it down. They didn't understand how to, like, really
That was out at Groom Lake, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I've obviously been into this for a long time. I remember as a kid seeing videos of people going out, and then they eventually closed it down. You couldn't get to that spot, but there was like
that was during the Obama administration. During the Obama administration, they actually had to admit that Area 51 was real, because before that, no one even knew it was real. I mean, that was always just a joke, like Area 51 was like for fun. But then they said, no, it is real, and we need to expand the forbidden boundary.
Yeah. And isn't that when people were gonna like bum rush it too? Is that when that happened?
That was during COVID.
Oh, okay.
During COVID, there was a bunch of dorks that were like, we're gonna crash Area 51. That's a good way to die,
Exactly.
kids. They'll fucking kill you.
Hey, natural selection.
Yeah,
man.
they're working on a lot of stuff out there, and some of it is weapons.
Right.
They can't have you internet dorks from Reddit just running out into Area 51.
Yeah, I think they eventually realized that, because I don't think they went out there, but that could have been bad.
I think it was all bullshit. They weren't gonna. What are you gonna do? How are you gonna get out there? Yeah.
Engagement farming. Yeah, man, there's a lot of crazy shit that's been going on. It's been going on for a while. Jamie and I were talking beforehand about the stovepiping too, and all the different the different ways that they compartmentalize what they're doing, and they talked about it in Age of Disclosure too. That's a big problem, because certain people are working on these parts of the craft to reverse engineer them, to understand them, but they don't have the whole picture.
Lazar was talking about that from the 1980s.
Yeah.
In 1989, he said the people that are working on metallurgy were not in contact with the people that are working on propulsion, and you weren't. He's like, science cannot operate like that.
Yeah. No, it can't, because you need to know what's going on beyond just this little part. that
Right.
you're working on.
And if you have a bunch of people that are sharing information, you get a much more comprehensive understanding
Exactly.
of what this thing is.
Yeah, we all benefit from communication.
Right, because there could be something involved in the actual structure of it that
Yeah.
lends to its ability to do something. It might not be simply just structure. It might be
Yeah.
structure with some sort of an ability.
Yeah, you can't see the forest through the trees in these situations, and it's unfortunate. And what the argument they made in this doco is that we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage because other countries have probably retrieved these things too, and they might be working on it, yes, in secrecy. But if people are working together,
Right.
and not stovepiping this thing
Right.
ad infinitum, then they might be able to actually make more progress faster than us. So part of the disclosure push is to be like, yeah, these things are real. We have them. Let's get our best scientists together to work on this holistically instead of compartmentalizing everything.
Well, just imagine if they had done that from 1947, where we would be.
Exactly.
If that's real. If Roswell was real, if all the crash was real, if Philip Drake Corso is correct, and all these people are telling the truth.
I know, and we still have to preface these things with if it's real, if it's real, and yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, as coming from academia, when I wrote my first book, I had to be like, if this is real, but it's hard. It's this paradox of sorts because how do you write to explain something that isn't real?
Right.
You know? What's the point of even doing that?
Yeah.
So I think we have to assume. I'm actually teaching a class at Montana Tech this spring called UFOs, History, and Science.
Ooh, I would take that if I was in school.
I think it's
be
going to be a
like,
lot of
"Fuck
fun.
yeah."
I know. I'm pretty stoked about it. And I had these artists design a poster in Norway and the UK, and just this crazy. Like I was like, how conservative should I be with this? Like just a UFO, and I gave them total artistic freedom. And there's like an alien holding the Earth, and this UFO swinging around. I'm like, all right, I guess that's what I'm doing. Plastered it all over campus to
Yeah.
recruit people to take the class. But like I'm going in on day one. We're not gonna fuck around with like, are these things real? We're not gonna waste time on that. We're gonna jump in. These are real. Here's what we're doing. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. Explore the theories. Explore the history. Explore the prehistory. Because it's a waste of time. Like these things are real.
You
know?
think they're real?
I know.
What
they are.
makes you convinced?
I have read enough accounts in researching this and from people that I know, I mean, starting from when I was a kid, hearing my biological father's account, the way he told it. And then I interviewed him again in college to try to get more information because I was just overhearing from the stairs when I was supposed to be in bed. He saw what he saw. And then eventually, I saw some UFOs.
What did you see?
I was kind of pissed, actually, because I started talking about this in 2018, and people were always like, you ever seen a UFO? No, never seen a UFO. I'd like to. And then finally, in 2022, it might have been late 2021. I don't remember exactly when. It was kind of warmish, so it was probably 2021. But everybody's in bed. I'm at my house. I live in a canyon, and I was having a whiskey, and I was like, I just walked up the canyon wall for some reason, like the hill behind my house. I don't really know why. I turned around, and I could see these 5 super bright lights over what's known as the East Ridge in Butte, Montana. They were just like sitting there right over the East Ridge. I was like, well, that's not normal. Those aren't usually there. And they weren't stars. They're way too big, way too close. I would say they were probably within 5 to 8 miles. They were in the distance, but they were like there.
What do you think of Bob Lazar's story? Because Bob Lazar's story, there's some fascinating aspects to it. But one of the most fascinating is some of the things that he's said that people said was horseshit has been proven to be true. Like one of the things, the biometric reader that measured the length of the bones in your hand and that they are unique as a fingerprint. And people are like, what are you talking about? And then they actually found out that this was something they really did have. And they have photos of this thing now. This is something that he talked about, and they claimed it was science fiction.
I mean, it's fascinating when someone touches upon a subject that the government does not want known about for any reason. Mm-hmm. And there is a campaign to discredit that person. And there's no doubt that happened to him. I mean, it was remarkable. And I write about him in the book because if you follow the logic that my source told me, that these were, modified human beings as part of a hoax. And the reason that I trust the source is because, Joe, he told me that he also worked on the program. So he had like a burden to unload, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you follow that logic through, then the Bob Lazar story is that when Bob Lazar said, I saw an alien, it looked like this, it was small, it had big eyes, those were the those were the surgically modified humans that the government was doing experiments on.
I think Bob Lazar's exact quote was he walked by a window and he looked in and he saw two agents that were looking down at something that was very small and looked humanoid, but he didn't know if it was a dummy or anything, and he wasn't even supposed to be looking in there. And it was a brief, like 1 second look that he has bounced around in his head back and forth. Has it ever occurred to you that maybe the guy who gave you that information did work there, but is also feeding you horseshit?
Well, the source was a major player in the Manhattan Project. He went on and worked in the Atomic Energy Commission. I mean, there's a wing of a museum named after him. His accolades, his awards were so extraordinary. It would be.
What's his name? You can't
I've
give it
never
out?
said his name. Although, I will say this.
Well, you're giving it away. Like, you're giving away a lot of the stuff.
He recently died, and he did give me permission to tell his full story after he died. And
Are you
I'm
gonna do
circling around that. But he was absolutely, with a Q clearance, that's what you have when you have access to nuclear secrets. So if someone has a Q clearance for decades and they're full of garbage, you really have to ask, my God, should this guy have a Q clearance? I mean, that's reverse engineering his credibility. But I think you should read the whole book because it's shocking what he says, but it does make sense if you can get through 400 pages of, the CIA's idea about information, disinformation, why we need to cover things up.
That's why I'm asking you if you think that he might have been lying to you.
I don't believe he was lying whatsoever.
Disinformation.
No, I don't believe.
So you think that the Russian government definitely did surgically alter people to make them look like aliens?
I believe.
Were there images of these things?
Believe what he told me.
Did you see photos?
No, I did not see photos.
No.
But here's the rub. Ready?
Okay.
When I was writing another book called Phenomena, which dealt with the CIA and the Pentagon's use of psychics, over decades. I mean, this goes back. Everything I write about pretty much goes back to post-World War. When
that remote viewing stuff.
Yes. And it's all about government. U.S. government takes pole position after World War II, and we now need to always be ahead of the curve. We must lead. We can never get beaten by the Russians. Now it's China, okay? So the psychic program had a lot of people who really believe in aliens or, other intelligence from other worlds. And when I was writing the Phenomena book, I learned a whole bunch of new information about how upset they were with my story because and they all knew the source, by the way. They knew the source, and they believed that he was fed misinformation. So these are two sides of the coin, which are super interesting, I think, if you can look at them with your own bias turned off and not have a desired outcome. I want to believe this. I don't want to believe this. Speaking of I want to believe, I was working on a project with Chris Carter, who is the X-Files creator. And the one person I took the source, that I wanted to meet the source was Chris Carter. And we went out there together and sat with him and met him. Really? And it was wild because the source had never even heard of the X-Files. And it was like,
what?
I know.
How do you
They
not
talked about baseball,
Really?
Yeah.
See, I don't have a desired outcome. I mean, I would love it if aliens were real.
Okay.
But when someone starts talking about disinformation and propaganda campaigns, but they want you to believe them.
Right.
But listen, I'm here telling you the truth. I'm here telling you the truth.
I'm not saying I'm telling you the truth at all. That's why I was
No,
like,
not you.
Joe, let's wait
For
till
sure not
hour
you.
3 because it's too explosive. People have such a horse in the race already.
With aliens, you think?
Well, maybe you are neutral. I don't know. I know I'm neutral.
Yeah, I will listen. I absolutely want aliens to be real. 100%.
Wouldn't it be interesting?
I'm not neutral, but I am neutral in my perceptions. And when I look at things, I go, I don't know about that.
Me too.
I want to see a picture. Like, what do these guys look like? I mean, what did they do to them? Did he describe what kind of surgical alterations?
I stayed with the source. I mean, after the book published, I would go and visit him. We'd sit in a Chinese restaurant and eat and talk, and I would try to get a droplet of information out of him.
And what was he doing?
Oh, my God.
Avoiding it?
He avoided it. I mean, look, here's another thing. When the book came out, his wife of 65 years knew it was him, okay? And I went out to Las Vegas and sat there in a room with the source and his wife. And she said, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you made this all up, to her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it's the truth. I mean, that's a triangular version of getting at the truth. But again, to reiterate, I believe he believes what he told me was the truth. That was the truth he was told.
I think there's certain agents that think it's fun to fuck with reporters and journalists and make things up. I really do. And I think especially when they're talking about secret information that they were sworn to protect, and then all of a sudden they want to talk to someone that they don't even know on the sneak tip. Let's meet at a diner. I'm going to tell you everything.
That's not how we met.
Well, I mean,
Right.
however you met.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Well, we
saying?
met because I was interviewing nuclear weapons engineers who were setting off nuclear bombs in Area 51, in the Nevada test site, Area 12, Area 23. And they all said to me, you've got to talk to the top engineer of all this weaponry. And they gave me his name. And we talked for days and hours about nuclear weapons. And then, in one conversation, he began to cry and told me this story that I was like, what? What?
Why was he crying?
He was crying because he participated in our version of the human experiments. Because what the Russians do, we do. Look, I've written 5 books about this.
We altered people to make them look like aliens?
According to him, we had a small program in 1951 where we wanted to see how the Russians did what they did, how they made human beings look like this.
So what'd they do? Take prisoners or something? Like what? Who do they alter?
He said they were handicapped children.
Oh, Jesus.
And he told me that he participated in this. So again, I mean, unless you have someone that lost their mind at age 90 and was willing to tell their wife of 65 years, I lost my mind.
So he's saying that he participated in something that altered handicapped children. When you say handicapped, you mean like Down syndrome or something like that? And they made them look like aliens and then killed them? Like, what did they do with this?
This is where we get into drops of information coming out. But what I can say is he had a grandchild that was born that way. And the grandchild did not live long. The grandchild died. And it made him feel so guilty about what he had done that he felt compelled to confess, if you will. And I remember saying to him, why are you telling me this? Why don't you tell a priest? And he said, a priest would judge me, and I can tell you won't.
Why wouldn't you judge him? I'd judge him.
Well, I guess that's why I'm a born journalist, Joe, because I really try not to judge people. I mean, my new book, Surprise, Kill, Vanish, it's about assassins. It's about people who work for the CIA who do what needs to be done on the ground in the name of national security. I don't judge them. This is why, what's really at issue here is morality, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can I tell you how I got the idea for this book?
Sure, but let me, before we go any further, so
you want to talk about the
saying,
aliens?
Yeah. Was he saying that there have never been any encounters with alien spacecrafts?
He was totally neutral about aliens. He had nothing to do with aliens. He could have cared less. He didn't watch the X-Files.
And what was his take on Bob Lazar?
His take on Bob Lazar was that he probably saw something that the government had an extension of the program.
How long were you there?
I'd say about 6 months or so.
And what progress was made while you were there?
Well, we came up with a bunch of reasonably good ideas about how the reactor worked. And one of them was the square base of it was essentially like a cyclotron, which is a small particle accelerator, a circular one. Particle accelerators, linear particle accelerators, are just a, long tube essentially, and they accelerate particles with high voltage and radio frequencies till they reach high speeds. But a cyclotron does that in a small circular area. And there's this very heavy element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts at the time.
But it is now.
It is now, yeah.
When did it become on the periodic table now, the way the charts now?
I don't remember. Do you remember when they
2004, Darmstadt, Germany, I think is where they first fabricated 4 atoms. They lasted 220 milliseconds with the atoms. It's nothing, right? And then it later was discovered a couple more times they could fabricate it. Then they gave it a place then on the periodic chart. After that, called it moscovium.
So they told you about this stuff in 1982?
Yeah, well,
No,
we
not
kind of.
1982.
What year was this?
It was 88 and 89 when
you
I
were
was
there.
there.
Oh, okay.
82 is when
82 was when you were
at
at
Los Alamos.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So 88, 89, they told you about this stuff. So this was not like...
No, they didn't tell me about it. That's one of the things that this group came up with. The God, I keep losing my train of thought with this thing.
So this one area, this element 115 was the fuel.
Yeah, it was the fuel.
The world will forgive you for having a migraine. Can I just
It's really
say
hard to think through this. Just give me a minute.
We'll just give you more
I
booze.
just want to say one. Yeah, definitely. I was going to say one thing. You know, Bob, for the last 30 years, people have just been on the attack on Bob. You know, getting to know him, the personal effects on his life. It's really hard to understand unless you meet his family and his wife. I mean, this is the last thing he wanted to fucking do was have to talk.
Yeah, we should explain that, Jeremy, that you and I had this conversation. I
a
watched
long
your
time.
documentary. We had this conversation, and I said, I have to talk to him.
Yeah.
The document, there's been detractors. There's been a bunch of people that called bullshit on many of the things that you've said, but over time, many of the things that you talked about, even in the 80s, have proven to be true. Things that people said were not true were proven to be true. Element 115 was one of them, right?
Right. Element 115, the fuel they had, was stable. In other words, it didn't decay. It wasn't emitting radioactivity. When they synthesized 2 or 3 atoms of the 115, it did decay, and it was not a stable element. So they're kind of 2 different things. But this is kind of typical. Elements always have, or pretty much always have, stable isotopes and unstable isotopes. Like I think cesium has like 30 unstable isotopes to it. So, hydrogen, for example, you're familiar with hydrogen gas. It's stable. It's not radioactive. But there's also 2 other types of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. And deuterium isn't radioactive. It's another stable isotope of hydrogen. But tritium is radioactive. Now, they're all hydrogen, but they just have different amounts of neutrons. So it's the same thing with other elements and element 115. Depending on the amount of neutrons it has, designates the isotope, but it's 115. They will continue to take or experiment and try and make 115 at different isotopes, and I'm sure eventually they'll come up with a stable version, but it's the stable version that has the properties that we're talking about.
So they somehow or another had acquired a stable version. Did they say that the stable version had come with this craft?
Yeah, it absolutely
did.
came with the craft, yeah.
So at the time, you having a firm knowledge of the periodic chart and knowing what was real and what wasn't real, what was your reaction to having this stable element 115 that wasn't even supposed to exist?
Well, everything was impossible.
Right.
I mean, down to the metal. I did get a chance to look inside the craft on only one occasion, and this was important because where the reactor sat might have been critical to how it operated, since everything operates without any interconnection, so the placement of components might be critical. So they allowed me to go inside and look at it. Again, I forgot where the hell I am.
So you're going into this craft, and what are you thinking when you're inside of it? Like, what are you seeing?
It's a very ominous feeling because there are no. First of all, everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took. I've said this before. Somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax, and then heated it just for a short time, so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature where 2 items meet. It's a really weird looking thing, but there was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly, to pick on it, a way to describe it.
So you get inside this thing, and it's designed for something that's much smaller than a human being.
Yeah, you can't really stand up till you get to the very center of it.
And how
but
tall are you?
I'm 5'10".
And what do you think this was designed for?
I'd say something close to half my height.
Wow. So these little 3-foot tallish creatures.
Yeah, and the seats were small too. I mean, obviously it was made, for something small. But there was no, there's nothing else in there. There's just seats, the reactor, and some of the subcomponents. There's no control panels. There's no bathroom. There's no decorative components or artwork or anything that you would recognize or trim. I mean, it's just a very bare bones thing.
You're not seeing any screens.
Well, there are archways around it that are part of the superstructure, and that one of the archways can become transparent. When I was in there was another group working on one of the archways, and you could call that a screen, more or less.
So through that archway, it would maintain the solidity, the solid, whatever metal it was.
Yeah.
But you could see through it?
Yeah, it just became transparent. Yeah. I saw that happen once or twice before I left.
Did you ask any questions about what the fuck that
No,
was?
there's no asking questions.
There's no asking questions.
No.
But when you watch something become transparent and you realize it's still there, but you can now see through it.
Yeah, I mean, now that's not that impressive. We do have some liquid crystal materials that are like that. They
I've seen that in bathrooms.
Smart glass. Yeah, they call it smart glass. So this is just, and I don't know if the craft is made of, an advanced metal or a ceramic. It was cold to the touch, so I would lean more towards a metal.
You're not allowed to ask questions.
No, they work on the buddy system, so I can only exchange ideas and talk to Barry. Now this really interferes with science because science is based on free discussion, and ideally you get a bunch of guys together, exchange ideas, work on problems, and that's how things move forward. But they're so over the top concerned about security, they split everything off, and everybody becomes stagnant. It just destroys any of the progress you can make, or at least makes it go so slow. I think they wind up shooting themselves in the foot.
Which is probably why they arrived at this bottleneck that they needed to get this madman with a jet-powered Honda come in and see what he could do.
I think that was an act of desperation. I think they wanted someone that thinks out of the box, and let's just give this guy a try here, because they weren't, and they might have done this 4 more times since up to the point in time today, assuming they're still working on this thing.
And when you see this craft and you're inside, was there any indication that there was an area that they would use to control it, to pilot it? Was there a pilot seat? There
were 3 seats. They sat around. The reactor was in the dead center of it, and then equidistant around there were 3 seats. That's all. There was a large. They're not consoles. They're large rectangular objects, also spaced equidistant around the center. There's nothing on them. There's no buttons. There's no lights. There's no controls.
Look the same color, the same
Everything
thing.
is the same
it's
color.
It's just a different shape.
Right. And directly underneath them, there's 3 levels in the craft. The main level is what we're talking about. Directly under that, those are the gravity amplifiers, the big rectangular objects. Underneath them are the gravity emitters that look like, for lack of a better word, a trash can hanging on a pipe. 3 of those. And then the top layer, this is just my personal belief, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer with some planar panels, sensor panels around the craft that we would call portholes, but they're not portholes. They're just black areas. And I think that just determines its, position in space. But I physically was in the center section, and I stuck my torso in the bottom section and hung upside down so I could see how the gravity amplifiers were positioned.
What is the roughly the size of this thing?
I don't remember from being there, but after all this stuff was over, I had John Andrews, a guy from the Testers Model Corporation, and we sat down and tried to figure out from what I saw and known sizes of things, and we came up with 52 feet in diameter. And
So
I
it's
think
fairly,
that's
fairly small.
Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable guess.
Now you said there's 9 of them, and you got a brief glimpse at the other ones. How were they different?
Oh, they looked completely different. One looked like I called it Jello mold, and it looked like a classic Jello mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like like a straw hat or something like that. That was sitting up on its edge, and the thin part of it it looked like a projectile had been fired through the edge of it. So I don't know if they were attempting to see if the metal could be penetrated, or if that's where the thing came from. Maybe it was shot down. But that was the only one where I saw there was, actual physical damage to it.
And that one was roughly the same size? They're all...
They were kind of too far away to tell.
And there was several teams that were working on the propulsion system, so there was different teams that were working on these different aircrafts?
I don't know. I could only assume.
Right. Now, when you're sitting in this thing and you're looking at this otherworldly craft, your goal is to try to figure out how this thing functions. Your goal is to try to figure out how this reactor. But you would imagine they would give you more time than just one day to check that out.
Oh, it wasn't one day.
Right.
Yeah, Barry was there. I think Barry was sleeping there. I'm sure they had. Now, that isn't weird. Up at the Tonopah test range where they work on stealth fighters, you go, I think, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and you stay up there too. So it's not weird to stay up at the test site.
Right.
So, I think he pretty much, and he acted like he's been up there for a long time.
Yeah.
But
maybe he's still there.
Yeah. Who knows?
Do you have contact with this guy?
No. Oh no. I wish I did. I kind of thought he was going to come out after I did.
Right.
And I think I took so much flack and it's so much shit for what went on. I think I wound up helping security there, and everybody became afraid of, doing or saying anything after that.
So what kind of reports did you have to give? So you're not making much progress, right? You're just trying to figure out what this thing is, and it seems impossible.
Well, we didn't personally make them. We were always – there was never a lot of information that we gained. The guy, you would call him our supervisor. His name was Dennis Mariani, and kind of a military-looking guy. And he would routinely pop in, during the day and, hey, what's going on, guys? And he would essentially relay any information, anything new we came up with. He was our go-between, where we presented him the information, then he took it to wherever they were, assembling all the data from everybody.
Now, I assume you're working normal days, like an 8-hour day?
No.
No?
No, it was really weird that I would be only called in on certain times and certain days. And they would be weird hours, too. Most of the time was later in the evening. I can get a call at 11 o'clock at night, and they'll say, it's now 11 o'clock. By 11:45, you need to be at the McCarran terminal, and, we'll let you know when we have more information.
But what did you do while you were there? If you're looking at this object, this reactor, and you can't figure out what it is or how it works, other than the fact that it works on this element that we don't even know about.
Sure. The thing was what you do with anything. If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. And all we did is try and come up with every kind of test we possibly could. We tested, it violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. One of the first laws of thermodynamics, essentially any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Even the headphones you're wearing, anything that takes power, some of that power is going to be converted to heat, and it's just wasted. This didn't. We looked at, back then we had infrared cameras. They're different today, but back then you had to pour liquid nitrogen into the camera to cool the sensor down and get these infrared images you've seen. But it never got, no matter what the load was on the reactor, it never got above the ambient temperature, which is impossible. I mean, you're pulling out huge amounts of power, and nothing ever gets warm. We tried measuring magnetic fields, and there was nothing there. So we started playing around with the emission from the emitters, the gravity wave itself, and saw what we could do with it and how it was focused. So we really spent all our time just trying to see what the stuff can do and what we can control.
So you were seeing what it could do, but you couldn't ever figure out how it was doing it.
No, not really. I mean, we really could only use or come up with a best guess. And now I can't say we really that I could absolutely state for certainty how anything actually worked.
Now, how did you know at all how they were piloting it? Because they were doing some tests where they were having these things fly around in the sky, and this is what gets us deeper into your story.
Right. I was out there for one test. Right. In fact, I was with Barry in the lab, and Dennis came in and said, "We're about to run a test. Why don't you guys come out?" Or I think he said, "Barry, why don't you come out here and bring Bob with you?" We went out there, and the craft was already outside the hangar and was just preparing to lift off. Now, they were in communication with somebody in the craft.
So there was a person in the craft.
Yeah, there was certainly a person in there. Now, it's not a comfortable place to be in because it's small. So the guy has to be sitting on the floor in the middle, my best guess.
And this is the same specific craft that you worked
that
on?
Was,
because that was the only craft that you were in.
The only one that I touched and worked on. And it quietly lifted off the ground, which was incredibly impressive to see.
Quietly or silently?
Well, quietly, because
Did it make some sort of a noise?
It produced a little corona discharge from the bottom. A corona discharge is kind of a high voltage brush, little bluish glow discharge. As it was lifting off the ground, you can hear a slight hiss sound. Now, as soon as it cleared the ground by about 5 or 10 feet, maybe even less than that, the hissing stopped and the blue glow disappeared. So it lifted off quietly, and then it hovered silently, if you want to be specific.
Wow. So then what kind of maneuvers was it doing?
It took off, for that particular time, it took off, moved a little around to the left and right, and then sat back down. The craft itself, they communicated with it with because I saw the guy talking in a regular VHF radio to the person in the craft. And I even saw the frequency that was on the frequency counter of the communication, the transceiver there. But what's weird is he shouldn't be able to communicate with the craft with a radio. The radio wave should bend around the craft. I mean, it shouldn't be possible. Every single thing about the craft and the way they operated didn't make any sense to us. I mean, that's something we talked about for a while after.
Why should the frequency bend around the craft?
Well, you really have to look at the way the gravity wave comes out of the craft. There's the reactor's in the center, and there's a waveguide that goes up to the top. There's actually a small appendage that sticks out of the top of the craft, and it produces a heart-shaped gravitational distortion around the craft. Now, if the craft is sitting in the air and you walk underneath it and look up, you actually cannot see the craft. The light bends around it. You're bending gravity, bends light. It bends radio waves. It shouldn't be possible to communicate with a craft that has an envelope around it that's distorting all forms of energy. But they were apparently in contact with it.
Somehow or another, so through some unexplained way that they didn't bother explaining to you. Mm-hmm. So this thing gets up, it just does some very simple maneuvers, left, right, goes down. And did they discuss this with you? I mean, they said they wanted you to see it.
No, they just wanted, they didn't discuss anything with me. It sat down, we looked around for a bit, and Barry said, let's go back. We went back in the lab. All we got to do was see it. Fast forward, to some months later, I did have the test flight schedule of the craft. Now, they had times they had designated high-performance tests. This obviously wasn't one that was a high-performance test. The high-performance test goes above the mountain range, and they do much more radical moves with the thing. Look, this is a prized item, and they're not doing anything like taking it out of the atmosphere or flying around to other countries or anything like
Right.
that. They just play with this thing right over the test site. But they were doing some radical moves with it. And since I had the test flight schedule, statistically, the amount of traffic in the surrounding areas on the highway was lowest on Wednesdays. And that's why Dennis told us that all the test flights occurred only on Wednesdays, because it'd be the least chance that anyone would see what's going on.
And this was before the government had expanded the forbidden territory around Area 51 and Papoose Lake and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that occurred after my story came out. Then people started going up on the mountaintops and trying to look down into there, and they kind of freaked out and then did the land grab and pushed everybody back. But yeah, I think all that occurred long after that I came out.
George, I think that you're probably like one of the most important figures when it comes to journalism in UFOs. And when you broke the Bob Lazar story, is that 89? When was that?
1989.
89. 1989, I remember reading about it. I remember hearing about it. I remember watching clips on television and watching countless Bob Lazar interviews. It all came out of you. I mean, did you think at that time, I mean, what was your thoughts about UFOs before you had met Bob Lazar, and how much did it change while you got to know him and hear his story?
It changed quite a bit. I had not really given it much thought at all. Probably the same level of curiosity as most people. You go about your life, you pay your bills, you go to work, you love your family, and it's always out there somewhere. Hey, I wonder what the deal is on that.
Right.
But had not really dwelled on it until it was a day in 1987. Into the studio comes a guy named John Lear. And I had heard sort of a little bit about him. His family was famous. His dad developed the Lear jet, the 8-track tape. John had run for the state senate, and he had a certain amount of credibility with our news organization, KLAS-TV, because he had helped us break a really big story. And the story was the stealth fighter, the F-117. He had told my boss, Ned Day, managing editor, about this amazing plane that was invisible to radar flying up in Tonopah in Area 51. We had an interest in Area 51, not UFO related, but Ned broke that story. It went national. So John Lear comes into the station one day with a stack of what turned out to be UFO documents. He plops them on Ned's desk and says, Ned, this is going to be the next biggest story, the biggest story in history. It's a UFO cover-up. Aliens are here. Technology's been recovered. Ned takes a look at it and says, I'm not doing this story. If it was true, I'd already know about it. This is crazy. Well, I'm eavesdropping, as I tend to do. I'm a curious person. So as he's going out, I said, Lear, let me take a look at this material. And I looked at it. I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. At the time, I was producing and hosting this little public affairs show, 30-minute interview show. It would air Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. Nobody watches it. It would be interviewing a city councilman, a county commissioner. What the heck? I'll put Lear on there. And I let him go. And he told me this big scenario about secret treaties with aliens and recovered technology and a giant cover-up. Some of the information sounded outrageous. Some of it seemed like it would be worth checking out. Suddenly, the phone starts ringing off the hook. I'm getting calls about people that, who was that guy? What was the deal on that UFO stuff? Is it real? I had him on again. 6 months later, the response was bigger. I had him on a third time with a guy named Bill Cooper. I regret that. And he told him an even more elaborate conspiracy.
He's the Behold the Pale Horse guy?
Yes.
Yeah, I read that book, and halfway through I was like, what in the fuck is this?
Yeah. He tied in the JFK assassination. And,
everything. Bases on the moon. Aliens are there right now.
He had this scenario where he had seen these documents when he was in the Navy, and he's going to tell the world about it, then he's going to go away. Well, every time he told the story, the documents got bigger and bigger, and anybody who criticized Bill Cooper became part of the secret government, including me. So we do this third show with Lear, and he hints that he knows a guy who might be going to work out at Area 51 and knows something about alien technology. That guy turns out to be Bob Lazar, but Lear didn't give me the name at that time. A couple months later, I am anchoring the 5 o'clock news on KLAS, and we have a nightly or evening interview segment, 5-minute segment, live interview. Our guest doesn't show up, and we're scrambling to find somebody to fill that hole. And I thought about Lear. So I called him up, not knowing what had been going on in Lazar's life or Lear's life. And I said, hey, is your that UFO guy you told me about, is he around? Would he do an interview? Just turned out that Bob had been through the ringer. A lot of stuff going on in his life. He felt threatened. And he said yes. We had to black out his face. We do this interview, and he spills the basics of the story. I worked out there at a place called S4. I saw 9 flying saucers in an underground base. This is technology that came from somewhere else. I'm in fear for my life. Holy cow, the phones start ringing off the hook. My news director comes rushing in, the station manager. Is that for real? What's the deal on that? And we realized we had touched the pulse of the public in a way that I didn't really understand. We arranged to go meet Bob Lazar, my news director, Bob Stodall, and I, that following weekend, and put him through a paces where we would ask him questions about his background and how he got the job. And we spent a couple hours with him, and we walked out of that meeting thinking, holy shit, what if this is true? This is really risky for us as journalists. It's risky for our personal reputations if it blows up in our faces and we do this story, and it would really damage the reputation of our news organization, which is KLAS is a jewel. It's always been a leader in Las Vegas, one of the best TV news operations in the country. We're putting a lot on the line. Well, look, we decide, let's take our time. Let's look into this guy's story. And then in order to understand Lazar, we'd have to look at the bigger picture of UFOs. So I started a cram course on ufology, and I read everything. And I spent 8 months like cramming for a final exam that never happened. I read everything. I interviewed people. That same year, MUFON had its international symposium in Las Vegas, and there all the world's UFO people came right to me. I got to interview them, traveled around, went to Los Alamos. Lazar took us into the lab. We took cameras in there. He walked us around, waving to people. We didn't even have to stop for security. Took us into the lab like it was a rabbit going through its own burrow. He knew his way around. We were allowed to take a camera in there. We put those stories together, put them on the air in November, and man, it just went through the roof. Every night of this 9-part series, people got the audience got bigger, phones ringing off the hook, people calling, giving us information. Suddenly, it's on something called Paranet, which was sort of a precursor to the internet, and it was huge. And it changed my life for sure. I had no idea that there were so many people out there interested in the topic, and I was hooked. And I really got hooked on Lazar not only because his story. Personally, I was interested in him. We became friends. I saw what happened to him after that live interview, and in the 7.5 months before we went and I revealed his identity, people were really messing with him. I mean, you cannot convey what it was like, how weird it was then, breaking into his house, leaving the windows open, messing with things in his home, breaking into his car, leaving the doors and windows down, just messing with his head.
And you think that was the government that was doing that?
Yeah, I do. I think so. And then, so I had put out a call to people, hey, I want other people to come forward.
This was before his identity was revealed.
Yeah,
we should explain
this. I am actively seeking information from the public. If you ever worked at Area 51 or S4, you know anything about this, you're at Nellis Air Force Base, reach out to me. So I started getting calls, and 6 people right in a row who had talked to me on the phone and offered to give me information were visited right after the call. One of them was a guy who did tax returns for people at Nellis Air Force Base, and he had got to know these guys really well and got information about crashes. There was a guy who was a golf pro at Nellis who had gone on road trips with officers and told him about this weird stuff out at Area 51 that seemed to be from somewhere else. He gets visited and told to shut up. There was a lady who worked in the court system. A cop told me about her, and I talked to her on the phone. And she had worked at the court system, but before she had worked for a company called Holmes and Narber, which is a defense contractor. And she said she sat in as a stenographer in these meetings and heard these conversations between the government contractors and Air Force officials about crashed saucers. And they would, after the meeting, they take the tape out of the typewriter and destroy it and take all the notes. And she agreed to tell me this story. It was just a tiny piece of the story. The next day, she's visited by these 2 guys in suits. They tell her, look, you are still subject to your security clearance. I hope you know that. And then they said, we know you travel to L.A. to see your daughter, and we know she comes here. It's a big desert out there. It'd be terrible if something happened to either one of you. This lady is scared shitless. She didn't make that stuff up. So 6 people who had offered to give me information on the phone, one right after another, get visited, and it made me mad. It also made me mad that dealing with, trying to fill in pieces of Bob Lazar's life. Now, I know there's some gaping holes. I know it better than anybody. I've had to deal with it for 31 years. But I always thought if he worked at Los Alamos in classified projects in a scientific or technical capacity, then it would make sense that he could get hired into a program like S4 as somebody who thinks outside the box. Despite personal shortcomings or whatever, they might bring somebody like him in to help them crack a problem that they hadn't been able to resolve themselves. So I focused on Los Alamos. I knew he had been there. I talked to people who remembered him from being there, but the lab kept telling me, no record of him. He's never here. And then I showed him, well, look, I've got the Los Alamos newspaper. It's a small town paper. There it is on the front page, a front page story. Bob Lazar, physicist, Mason facility, Los Alamos lab. It's a story about his jet car. Nope, still have no records of him. And then I found his name in the phone book from the era when he was there. He's in the lab phone book. He had been hired by a company called Kirkmeyer, which is a company that's a headhunter that fills positions at Los Alamos and places like that. So great, I'll reach out to Kirkmeyer. They said, yeah, we hired him. Yeah, we've got records. Can I get it? Can I get his employment records that would show where he went to school, whatever information you guys had? Yes. A couple weeks go by, nothing. Couple more weeks go by, I call him again, I start writing them. I've got a stack of letters that thick. It went on for 2.5 years, and finally, by the end of it, they said he was never here. We don't have any records. That pissed me off. It made me mad, and I think that is really what got me hooked in the story, is that I was being jacked around by government and national facilities like that.
We should explain the Los Alamos thing, because the Los Alamos thing coincided with him doing work at MIT, right? Is that correct?
That's how he's explained it to me. Yeah,
and
right.
The way he explained it to me, I don't think I'm at liberty to say what the project was, because the project, the way he was describing it, is essentially internationally illegal, like what they were working on. And that's one of the reasons why he was saying, he explained what the project was. It sounded very feasible, also very evil. And then it was basically a weapon. And then he said that this was the reason why there was no actual record of him studying at MIT. It wasn't important that he got a degree. It was important that he understand the technical specifications of what they were attempting to accomplish.
That's my understanding as well. Yeah. And, it's always been the most problematic part of his background. And it's where a lot of people in the Bob Lazar story, that's where they stop.
But the thing is, when you listen to him talk and when he describes things, it's very clear he's educated.
Oh, he's a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
But I had always told him, and Bob, you're my friend. I want to have a conversation with you about these claimed degrees, because I didn't believe that he'd ever sat down. In those days, you go to a college like MIT or Caltech and get a degree. You've got to take classes in something other than science. I could not imagine Bob Lazar taking an English lit class to save his life. But he is a brilliant guy. I'll give you an example. In April, COVID thing is raging. My wife and I are staying at home. We're getting packages delivered for food and things of that sort. I'm a little worried. They didn't know about contact, whether you can get it off of cardboard boxes or whatever. And I mentioned to Bob in a phone conversation, I'm thinking about buying one of these UV screener systems. He goes, wait a second. Don't buy one. I think I've got the parts that I can make you one in my garage. And a week later, it arrives. This thing, he's got it in his garage, handmade, this big scanner with these UV things that works. He just whipped it up in his garage.
I'll remind you, you got the scanner. I got a laser gun.
Right.
You got a laser gun?
I did, man. It is super powerful. So it's like a handheld toy that he retrofitted with a superpower. So I'm like lighting shit on fire in my house.
So it looks like a handheld toy, but it's actually a real laser?
It's a toy with full noise, but he put a diode in there, and it's super powerful. Like it can light shit on fire. My wife hates that shit. So I got the laser gun.
You also got the flamethrower, though. Lazar made a flamethrower. This is before your buddy Elon made flamethrowers.
No comment on that. Yeah,
well,
it's a massive
he made one. Made a flamethrower.
Massive.
Yeah, he's obviously a very intelligent man.
Yeah.
When you listen to him talk, there's no bullshitting going on. When he talks about talks about undeniable, concrete things when it comes to science, when it comes to elements, when it comes to propulsion systems. He clearly knows what he's talking about. And the really confusing thing for people that are detractors is he really hasn't changed his story in 31 years. It really is the same story. And that's really hard to do.